911, what's your emergency? 911, what's your emergency?
Be advised, Car 4 has control of the pursuit. Proceed with caution.
Hey, everybody. How are you all? Hey, Vicky G. Good to see you. Hey, Danger Dave. Hey, Maria. How are you, my dear? So good to see you. I miss you. Hey, Melissa. Hey, John. Welcome. Good to have you. Always good to have you with me. So glad that you guys all made it. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the Laci Peterson case 20 years later. And I have a special guest that I'm going to go ahead and bring on. I have my daughter with me tonight. You all know her as one of my moderators on my channel. Everybody welcome Shelby to the show.
Hello.
Hi, Shelby. How are you?
Cold. How are you?
I know. Isn't the weather been weird?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like 60 degrees and now it's down in the 30s and rainy and cold. It's crazy.
It is.
Crazy, crazy.
Hi, Melissa.
So anyway, guys, I'm hoping that tonight goes a lot better than it did Thursday night. I appreciate everyone who stuck with me on Thursday. I know it was a bad night for me with my coughing, and but I feel so much better. I think my cold is definitely gone, but let's just hope that the cough stays away. But if not, Shelby can handle this, so I will just turn it over to her.
I don't know about that. We'll see how it goes.
But yeah, so for a lot of people, this case is a really volatile subject, and it still is today, 20 years later. You have the majority of America who believes that Scott Peterson is guilty and is exactly where he belongs, and that he deserved the death penalty for this case, for this crime. And then there's a handful of people in the other corner that believes that the jury got it wrong. And there's been numerous documentaries, made for television, movies regarding this case over the years. Same to you, Dave. I hope everything is well with you. No, Shelby doesn't have a channel, Melissa. She's too busy.
I'm way
she's
too way.
she is so
I
way
barely
too
make it
busy.
here, let alone run my own show.
She has a family kids to raise, and she's a full-time mom and a full-time school administrator. So she does all kinds of stuff to take care of our kids. So, but anyway, she's a busy woman. She'd do good at having a channel if she had time. She
Yeah,
really
but then
would.
I just compete with you, and that would
So,
just be silly. So,
but I basically got her, I think, really truly interested in true crime when she was little because she didn't have a choice. She had to watch.
Do you remember the very first true crime? Well, it wasn't really a true crime thing, but I remember the first thing we ever watched was it Baby Melissa?
Yes.
Yeah, when she fell in the well.
Mm-hmm.
I vividly remember, or Jessica, not
Jessica,
Melissa.
baby Jessica.
Yeah.
In Texas. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
Dave, you and COVID and me, I tell you, I don't think I had COVID, but man, it lasted well over a week for me. So as you guys know, I think I missed 3 or 4 lives. So
I had it back at Christmas and completely lost my voice.
yeah, it was bad news. So anyway, this case has been one of those cases that will always, I think, for everyone who lived through it, will always remember it. Not only the fact that it happened at Christmas, but the fact that she was a pregnant mom, first-time mom. She was 8 months pregnant when she went missing. And I think that because of it being at Christmas, it just tugged on the whole country's heartstrings, and everybody was involved in this case. And it went national and international very quickly. Here comes the cough. So the case happened back in 2002. Lacey Peterson went missing on December 24th, 2002 at 7.5 months pregnant. The police had one suspect at the time. It is the only suspect that we are aware of that the police ever looked at, which was her husband, Scott. Other likely suspects did exist. There were tips to find Lacey and bring her home safe existed as well. And there was evidence to exonerate Scott that existed. But believe it or not, none of those things were truly pursued by law enforcement. The prosecution in this case had many, many changing theories over the time before, from the time she went missing until the time they went to court. During prosecutor Rick DeTasso's closing argument, he stated the following: "It's very simple. The defendant strangled or smothered Lacey Peterson the night of February, January, December 23rd, or in the morning while she was getting dressed on the 24th. So, I mean, there's
a problem right there.
There's a problem. I can't tell you when he did it. I can't tell you if he did it.
Or how.
I can't tell you if he did it at night. I can't tell you if he did it in the morning or in the afternoon. I can't tell you if he did it at all. And I'm not going to try to convince you of something that I cannot prove. But I don't have to prove that to you. I only have to prove that he did it. This was a prosecutor's closing argument in a death penalty murder case, you guys. That argument is what was said by this prosecutor in this case. He doesn't have to tell you how he did it, why he did it, where he did it. All I have to tell you is that he did it. How does that work? I'm just confused. At the end of a 2-year investigation and a 6-month capital murder case, that is the best this prosecution had. The media exposure generated when Lacey went missing was something never seen before. And we will talk about that tonight. The media was a powerful force, and much wrong information was disseminated by them in an effort to be the first to report. Fact-checking was no longer a luxury that most of the television and internet news markets cared about. The word alleged did not apply to Scott. They never talked about him being innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. He was guilty in the media. And they had a responsibility to communicate to the public what was going on in the courtroom, and most of them went for ratings instead of the truth. And I'm here to tell you, because of this case itself, is why I am not a Nancy Grace fan. Nancy Grace is the worst about this when she covers cases, and she knows better. Nancy Grace was a prosecutor. She knows better than to do this. She's a
prosecutor and a victim herself.
She knows that
she knows both sides of it.
In this country, you are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And people forget that, and they rally around these cases and they get their own opinions without all the facts. And we're all guilty of doing that because we get caught up in the rhetoric and everything that's going on. And we don't have all the evidence and we don't have all the facts. We've talked about this for a long time in Delphi and in the Delphi case. We have so little of the facts in that case, but everyone has this strong opinion, right, of what happened. So we have to look at these cases this way. And when Shelby and I break this case down for you tonight, that's what we're here to do. We want to show you both sides of what the prosecution did when they went into court with this case and the things that they left out on purpose, the things that they did not talk about in court that would have led jurors to think about reasonable doubt. Because I'm sorry, when you don't have a body and you don't have, at the time he's arrested, you don't have a body, you don't have any indication in the home that there was a murder done. You can't find any of this evidence, but yet you're absolutely sure he did it. It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense.
I think that's important. I think one of the main things you have to focus on is that the police had access to the Peterson home within an hour or two of her being noticed or reported missing. So that's, in my opinion, is very quick. And they searched that house high and low, and there was nothing in the house to concern them that she had been killed there. None.
Right. And there's so many misconceptions around this case, both by the police, the prosecution, the media, and it's widespread. There's articles out there on the internet that you can find that address these misconceptions, and everything that has been written about this case is not fact. And you have to look at things that have been, what I say is, if I'm going to read something on a case, I want it to be fact-based, taken from court documents, taken from the evidence that the police had, that they presented in court to the jury. That's what I want to see, because that's the only thing a jury is supposed to access and debate on. Not conjecture, not speculation, not possible theories of this or theories of that or theories of this. But what is it that they had that proved Scott Peterson killed his wife and his unborn child. So, there's just a lot. And so I hope tonight when we go through this case that you guys will keep an open mind about it and realize that, yeah, this case was highly circumstantial and one of the most bizarre circumstantial evidence cases that we've ever seen, actually. Just crazy.
But even the circumstantial evidence that the prosecution presented was not, I don't even know what the right word is. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't like pointing to the crime.
Right. Well, Mark Garagos is one of the leading defense attorneys in the country. Mark Garagos is very, very good at what he does. And he was the defense attorney for Scott Peterson. And the DA came out and said that they had voluminous amounts of evidence in this case, both direct and circumstantial. And Garagos said he thought the evidence was feeble at best.
Danger Dave, you're not the only one.
Sound familiar, you guys? It's exactly what's been said about Delphi. Exactly. The defense says the evidence is feeble. Prosecution says it's voluminous. But is there consciousness of doubt in this case?
And I think that's important too. Whenever you are talking about a death penalty case, in my opinion, there should be no way for you to reasonably doubt that person's guilt if you're going to find them guilty. And there are numerous holes in this prosecution's case that they presented at trial.
Dave, you are not the only one that does not believe that OJ didn't do it.
He didn't do it.
I don't believe he committed the murders. Now, whether or not he paid someone to do it, that may be possible, but I do not believe he was the man that committed those murders that night. And I don't believe they proved it either.
No, we covered that case.
So I just want, not yet.
Not yet.
No, we have not. We're going to. But that is my opinion on that case.
We talk about that case so much, I forget which we got.
And like I said, I lived that case, and I watched the court thing for 8 months. I watched it all, and I just do not believe that they proved their case. But that's, again, going in with it's hard to be that person, to go in with an open mind and try to weigh everything and not let our emotions take us somewhere else in this case. And it's really hard. Everyone thinks, oh, if I was on the jury, I would do this. When you're sitting on a jury and you have a man's life in your hands, you're sentencing him to death, you better be doggone well sure about what you're doing. And if you have any doubt that he may not have committed this crime, in my opinion, you should find not guilty, because you have to have some pretty strong evidence when you're going for the death penalty.
Yes.
I mean, that's just how I feel. There's a tremendous amount of indirect evidence against Scott Peterson. I'm not going to sit here and say there isn't. There is.
Scott Peterson's not a good person. Nobody's going to argue that point.
No. A cheating husband does not make a murderer. And we all know that he was a horrible person. The way he treated his pregnant wife by going out and having this affair and pretending to be all these things and doing all these things that he was doing. But for him to just, for them to say, well, he wanted out of the relationship, so it was just easier to kill her. It's not just her. It's his unborn child, his son. That's a lot. And so, yeah. I think what we just brought it up with OJ, but I think it's painfully demonstrated in this case, as much as it was with OJ, that the firsthand authentication of facts in this case was not well done. The Modesto Police Department fumbled. They did not look at anyone else. They didn't listen to the people who had told them, 11 of them, that they witnessed and saw Lacey after Scott left that home for work and to go fishing.
Yep.
They saw her alive. These are eyewitnesses that they just, the prosecution just basically said they got it wrong. They didn't see her. And I can understand if you've got one or two, maybe.
Right.
But when you've got 12 witnesses that are saying that they saw her, there's a problem. I just feel like Scott was not given a fair trial. I really, really don't, because of the zoo that was created in the media after this case broke. He had already been found guilty.
So the first thing about him being found exactly where the body was found. So think of it. This is how I kind of always present this argument based on that one. Scott's a smart man, whether you want to agree with that or not. He's not dumb. So if he did commit this crime and he dumped her there, why would he put himself in that location? Secondly, the police did not withhold that information from the public. So if somebody was holding her or had already killed her, what better way to cover it up than to go and dump her in the exact same spot her husband said he'd been fishing that day?
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
If he's calculated as he was with everything else, he lived a world of lies constantly every single day between his mistress and his wife and his family. So for him to make up a lie of where he really was that day would have been nothing.
Yeah, and he already made up or decided to do this whole fishing trip on Christmas Eve. And exactly why would he do that and then go tell the police that's where he was if what he was doing was not fishing but disposing of a body?
Right.
I mean, that's like leading them right to you.
Mm-hmm. And
secondly, it doesn't make a lot of sense that
there was no evidence in his boat other than a few strands of her hair, which they're married. My hair's all over my husband's stuff, his car, everywhere. So I think finding a couple of her hairs in the boat does not mean that her body was in the boat. If there was a dead body in that boat, there would have been more evidence of such. There was no evidence of a dead body in the house. They had cadaver dogs search that house. None of them hit anywhere in that home indicating a dead body was in there. Not one.
And nothing in the volumes of evidence that the prosecution claimed they had placed Lacey at the Berkeley Marina on or about December 24th or 23rd. Nothing. They have no evidence of her being there.
If people saw him at the marina, wouldn't they have seen him dumping her body then as well?
Exactly.
I mean, that I don't understand how you could see him, but you don't. I mean, she was an 8-month pregnant woman. Her and herself was not small, but being 8 months pregnant, that's not an easy thing to just
hide,
throw over, not to mention the size of his boat.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And they did that.
His boat was like a 2-person boat.
They actually did that. Mark Garagos had experts come in and do that, and they actually sunk the boat trying to throw somebody over.
You guys, the Bay Area in which he was at, those waters are extremely rough. That is not a cold, rough, choppy. They could be very dangerous on a good day.
And finding your own blood, finding Scott's blood on a panel of his truck, what evidence is that of anything?
Nothing.
You would expect to find a man who works the type of job that he did, to find his own blood on the side of his truck isn't proof of a murder.
No.
It could have been there for days, weeks, whatever. They
It could
never
have been there
found
afterwards.
they never found a knife, a sharp object with Lacey's blood on it. Nothing. They
Nothing.
didn't find anything. And finding your wife's hair in your toolbox, that doesn't point to murder either. Hairs and fibers and other isolated items pointing to Lacey. I mean, you would expect her hair and fibers, as Shelby said, to be all over the place.
Yeah. So I think one thing that you have to focus on, and I have a thing that I found. When you are going into this kind of a case, it is not the defense's job to prove anything. The burden of proof lies on the prosecution. They have to prove their case. So let's think about this. So the prosecution can't prove she was murdered, but the defense can't prove she wasn't. So the prosecution just says you have to say she was. They can't prove that she was murdered on the night of the 23rd, but the defense can't prove she wasn't. The prosecution can't prove she was even murdered at the house, but the defense can't prove she wasn't. The prosecution can't prove she was transported in the pickup, but the defense can't prove she wasn't. The prosecution can't prove she was transported in a boat, but the defense says, we can't prove she wasn't. And the prosecution can't prove she was washed ashore, but the defense can't prove she didn't either. And the prosecution can't prove where she and Connor separated, but they can't prove where either. So it's where the prosecution says it is. So the prosecution couldn't prove anything, any points of this case here that
and
they
that's
made.
the problem, because that is the burden of proof in this country relies on the prosecution. The defense has to prove nothing.
Nope.
The defense does not have to prove anything.
You are innocent until proven guilty. And they did not. They had no evidence. They have no timeline.
Nope.
The only timeline they have is the last time Lacey spoke to someone other than Scott Peterson, and the time in which Scott Peterson said he left his house to go fishing on the 24th. Beyond that, they have no idea when Lacey disappeared or was murdered. The other problem is when they did find her body, Connor's gestation was further along than the 24th of December. How's that happen?
Exactly. That was one of
That
the
right
things
there is
that bugged
right
me.
there is my
there. Yeah, that bugged me. And when there was another case a few months before Lacey's of a pregnant woman going missing. It's very similar to her and coming up and found exactly the way she was found. And they didn't even look at that case
Nope.
to see if there was a similarity or similarities. What a lot of people don't know is that Lacey's hands, her hands, her feet, and her head were all cut from her body.
Melissa, no, Connor was not born yet. But when Connor and her body, they found them in the bay, Connor's gestational age was past the December 24th date of when they said she was murdered. So if she was murdered on December 24th, Connor would have no longer grown or developed. But he was developed well past December 24th. Therefore, she could not have died on December 24th.
And from we'll get into that in just a second, Maria, because I think I have that information. I think it was almost weeks, like
Yeah, I think it was like 2 weeks or more.
2 or 3 weeks, or even up to 4. The detective in this case, Brocchini, one of them, admits that he instructed family and friends to try and trick Scott Peterson into implicating himself. He said, whatever lies the fertilizer salesman told couldn't possibly be as smelly as the deception that was being used to trap him. And I know that the police can do a lot of things and they can lie. They can say their tactics are acceptable, but to me, it's just ridiculous. It's okay for the police to lie, but if a defendant lies, it proves he's guilty.
When they did 300 plus phone taps of conversations that Scott had with multiple people, Amber, his parents, his sisters, not once did he implicate or give any kind of nothing. There was nothing.
So, no, the weights did not mutilate her. The phone bugging that police did with Scott started 2 weeks after Lacey went missing. And they secretly began wiretapping him and were trying to get a confession tape, is what they were trying to do, is get him to confess to someone and hope that it would solve their crime. They recorded hundreds of calls, conversations with reporters, with attorneys. That's against the law, ladies and gentlemen, to record calls with you, again, with your attorney. That's confidential, private information. And the only considerable circumstantial evidence in this case is Amy Roca, who is Lacey's sister, had an unanswered telephone call to Scott on the afternoon of December 24th. Amy called Scott, and it went unanswered. And Detective Brocchini lied during the leaked Christmas interview and insisted on 12:30 p.m. Peterson, in fact, called his home around 2:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Lacey Peterson did not pick up the phone. Peterson claimed her absence troubled him, so he later dialed the number again. But again, Lacey did not answer. It's reasonable to conclude that if Peterson was concerned about trying to reach his wife, he would have responded when her sister phoned. No matter, prosecutors are alleging Peterson murdered and disposed of her in the San Francisco Bay sometime during the night before his afternoon fishing trip, eliminating the interference with that his actions were a disguise during his horrific deeds. So you can see how the prosecution's case theories changed. Did he dump her the night before and then he went fishing on the 24th? What did he actually do?
Melissa, just because somebody wants a lawyer doesn't mean they're guilty. And if you have your spouse go missing, I would suggest the first thing you do would be to get a lawyer, because they're going to protect you in your best interest, whether you're guilty or not.
And no prosecutor can convince a jury to put a man to death simply because his actions are strange and police found no other suspects. That is not the burden of proof that we rely on with our Constitution in this country. And there are plenty of suspects in this case, including some of the prosecution's key witnesses. There were lots of mistakes made, miscalculations, misrepresentations by the Modesto police and authorities. And Scott Peterson had peculiar behavior, but that again does not mean guilt. It's just not enough. Scott Peterson left a message for Lacey on December 24th. Hey, beautiful. I just left you a message at home. It's 2:15 and I'm leaving Berkeley. I won't be able to get to Vela Farms to get the basket for Papa, but I was hoping you would get this message and go on out there. I'll see you in a bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye. And that's the message that Scott left for her. So what is the evidence of doubt in this case? December 28th of 2002, authorities searched the water near Berkeley Marina for the very first time. January 3rd.
What date was that?
December 28th.
Okay. Took them that long?
December 28th, authorities searched the water near Berkeley Marina for the very first time.
Wouldn't that have been their first stop?
Yeah. January 3rd, 2003, police spend hours combing the water near the marina. January 9th, sonar search in the water near the marina reveals an object authorities think is a body. It turns out to be an anchor. March 12th, authorities searched the San Francisco Bay again. So from January 9th to March 12th, no searches were done. March 12th, they search again. On April 14th, the body of a woman and a male fetus wash ashore in Richmond, California, are found. And 4 days later, they arrest Scott. On May 22nd, police searched the San Francisco Bay again. Modesto Police Chief Roy Wasden refused to describe the evidence or say how Lacey Peterson died, but he said it appeared she was killed the day before Christmas because no credible witness saw or heard from her after that. That is not
That's a lie.
Proof.
It's also a lie.
It is, and it's not proof of anything.
So just hold on one second here, because I have a thing that's from scottpetersonappeal.org. So in the area within a mile radius of Lacey's house, there were 24 sightings. Within a 3-mile radius, there were another additional 7. That is a total of 31 sightings after Scott Peterson left his house on the morning of the 24th. The Modesto police only followed up, I believe what it said was with 2 of those sightings, and that was by phone calls. They did no other detective work. None. 31 sightings. Now, were they all Lacey? We don't know. But neither do the police, because they didn't ask.
On December 23rd, 2002 at 5:45 p.m., Scott and Lacey went to the salon where Lacey's sister Amy works. Amy Roca said she was sitting next to us, just talking to us. She was really tired. She just seemed exhausted from her pregnancy. Later that night, at 8:30 p.m., Lacey spoke to her mother. Sharon Roca said, she had called. I asked them on a couple of different occasions to come to our house on Christmas Eve. She called about 8:30 Monday evening to tell me that they would be coming to our house for dinner. It was only a couple of minutes because I was on another call. She sounded extremely tired, and I asked her if she was feeling all right, and she said that she was just really tired. Presumably, the Petersons ordered pizza and had a movie, and then watched the film The Rookie on TV, and went to bed sometime around 10 or 11 p.m. the night of the 23rd. There were 13 hours that are missing. Stephen Wayne Todd and Donald Glenn Pierce were burglarizing a nearby home and say while they were committing their crime, they saw Scott Peterson doing something suspicious around 3 a.m. According to a truck driver, Scott Peterson's truck and boat are seen 90 miles from Modesto near the Berkeley Marina at around 3:30 a.m., sorry. Scott Peterson told investigators that the next morning on December 24th, his wife, who was a very active woman, and that she was going to mop the kitchen floor and take their golden retriever Mackenzie for a walk. And a neighbor, Susan Medina, at 8:55 a.m. observed Peterson loading something wrapped in a blue tarp into his truck. Peterson says he loaded some umbrellas into his truck and left home at 9:30 a.m. to get his boat from a warehouse and go fishing. Peterson may be telling the truth about his wife's sudden burst of energy but they say his timeline seems off because records show at 10:08 a.m. Peterson's cell phone was used from or near 523 Covina Avenue. According to Connie Fleeman, about 10 a.m., she notices Scott Peterson's truck and a boat in a market parking lot and notices no fishing gear. He flashes her a big grin and drives off. Fleeman catches up with him and rolls down her window to tell him the box in his truck is open. Fleeman says Scott Peterson grimaced with a horrifying, scary look and sped away. Around 10:15 a.m., a woman residing on the edge of East Laloma Park hears screams. This is near the Peterson home, the park. At 10:18 a.m., a neighbor, Karen Service, finds the Petersons' golden retriever, Mackenzie, leashed but wandering outside alone. So 3 minutes after the screams heard in the park, where Lacey always goes to walk the dog, 3 minutes later, the neighbor finds Mackenzie leashed but wandering outside alone. Service grabs the leash and puts the dog back into the Petersons' backyard and leaves. At 10:30, neighbor Amy Krigbaum is awakened by barking from two dogs, one of whom may have been Mackenzie. Other witnesses, including Homer Meldondo and Bill and Vivian Mitchell, claim to have heard dogs or seen Lacey in the area at various times that morning. Scott had not yet headed for the Berkeley Marina 85 miles away. The computer at his warehouse was used until nearly 11 a.m. Berkeley Marina workers, the gardener, Mike Avesta, apparently say they saw Peterson struggling to launch his boat around 12:30 p.m., and a parking stub reportedly puts Peterson at the marina sometime around 1. Many other witnesses claim to have seen Scott Peterson on his boat at various times. That afternoon, Peterson makes several cell phone calls, including one to his wife at approximately 2:15, which is the one I read to you. All calls made to Lacey went unanswered. Ron Gransky got an answering machine when he tried to call his stepdaughter at 4 p.m. At 4:30, Scott Peterson says he returned home, ate, washed his fishing clothes. 45 minutes later at 5:20, Peterson calls Sharon Roca, Lacey's mom, saying Lacey is missing. Modesto police are called on December 24th, 2002 at 5:48 and notified of the disappearance of Lacey, 24 hours after the last person besides Scott saw her alive. So that's the timeline that they have. And prosecutors contend Scott Peterson suffocated or strangled Lacey in their home sometime during the early hours of December 24th, and under the cover of darkness, he wrapped her corpse in a tarp and then transported her body to the San Francisco Bay using a truck and a boat, weighed it down with concrete anchors and dumped it in the water, and then went back home cleaned up from the murder. And prosecutors are saying, or did say, every eyewitness was wrong about seeing Lacey or Scott on December 24th, and that the crime went practically unobserved. They don't think anybody saw Scott. Even the ones that said they saw Scott, that the prosecution was not buying that either. So when the bodies were recovered from the beach just a few miles from the Berkeley Marina, where Scott Peterson told police he was fishing the day he reported Lacey's disappearance, may have spent up to 4 months in the cold San Francisco Bay waters. 4 months. Remember, she was found in April. And while Lacey's unborn son washed ashore with his umbilical cord still attached, her remains were reportedly in an advanced state of decay, with only the torso intact, and the baby was not. That to me right there is just so hard to understand. I mean, if Lacey's body's decayed and has this advanced state of decay, why would his not be that way as well? They said that her body was ravaged by the sea so much that her head, neck, her forearms, parts of her leg, as well as most, if not all, of her internal organs were missing. And that there was no discernible cause of death.
But she was strangled.
There were 3 ribs of hers that were broken, and a pathologist could not tell if the fractures preceded her demise or were the result of being roughed up by the tides in San Francisco Bay. So prosecutors would say that her body was so ravaged by the sea that she lost her head, her neck, her forearms, her hands, her feet, and most of her internal organs were missing, but they couldn't tell whether or not the fractures of her bones were caused by that ravaging.
Right. JDR, if the fetus was being protected by the mother's body, then why were her internal organs
missing,
not protected as well?
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like, in my head, the way it would work is Lacey washes ashore intact. Connor would still be inside her. But she didn't. She washed ashore and her abdomen was open. There was nothing inside of her. She had no vital organs inside of her, which means Connor was not inside of her. How did Connor get outside of her? Because if she was ripped open by a sea creature or shark or fish or whatever, Connor would have some kind of damage to him.
The prosecution's pathologist, Dr. Brian Peterson, no relation to the family, testified at the preliminary hearing that he could not determine Lacey's cause of death. Everything was being a theory or surmised by the prosecution as to whether or not Scott strangled her or what happened. Lacey had caffeine in her system when she died. A toxicology report shows while her unborn son Connor did not.
That's interesting.
Toxicology documents also show that police specifically asked medical examiners to test Peterson's remains for the date rape drug GHB, and that none was found.
JDR, if she was strangled, how do you know that? She had no neck or head. Where's the evidence that she was strangled? There's not. She could have been shot. She could have been poisoned.
Connor was found with plastic tape around his neck and a major gash on his torso. And one of the things that the prosecution brought up about Scott was that he had scrapped plans to go golfing on Christmas Eve because it was too cold, but chose to instead go fishing on the cold San Francisco Bay. He cut the fishing trip short because it started raining and he got cold. His temporary fishing license was bought the previous day, shortly before announcing the plans to golf. Along with his fishy alibi, investigators were struck by Peterson's flat, uncaring manner and say he seemed strangely detached and cold. Still not evidence of a murderer.
JDR, what I'm saying, I'm not saying I believe Scott's lies or that I don't believe Scott's lies. What I'm saying is the prosecution did not prove their case.
Yeah, this
There
has
is
nothing
reasonable
to do
doubt.
with believing.
This has nothing to do with what I personally feel about Scott Peterson. Based on the evidence given to me and that I have seen, I could not find him guilty in a court of law.
And
sentence him to
especially with
death.
the death penalty.
Especially with the death penalty.
Yeah.
Does he deserve a new trial? Yeah, he absolutely deserves a new trial.
Well, there was
Will he
jury
ever get one or
misconduct.
get a fair trial? Probably not.
Yeah.
Being a liar does not make you a murderer.
Yeah. Right. Police are examining a possible connection between Peterson's disappearance and a burglary across the street from her home. And this was reported on December 31st, 2002 by CBS. Susan Medina was burglarized sometime between Christmas Eve morning and late on December 26th. And she thinks that maybe Lacey Peterson saw something that put her in grave danger. It's just too much of a coincidence, said Medina. Some of the items taken from the Medina home included a safe that contained $50,000 in jewelry. On January 18th, 2003, the Modesto Bee said one of Lacey Peterson's family members believes that whatever happened to her may have happened or occurred sometime on December 23rd after she spoke to her mother. Lacey Peterson opened the drapes in her home every morning, said the family member who asked not to be identified. I don't think she made it through the night, the family member said. If she was alive that morning, she would have opened up her drapes. I know that's something minor, but maybe it was overlooked. On November 14th, 2003, ABC News said a Modesto police detective testified Friday that he received a tip from a woman who claimed to have seen a woman who resembled Lacey walking with two men in a park on the day she disappeared, but didn't follow up on it. Under cross-examination by attorneys for Scott Peterson, Detective Philip Owen said he didn't pursue the tip because he didn't think it was going in the right direction. What the heck direction would that have been? What direction would that have been? That is just crazy to me.
Just a couple things. So I'm not cherry picking facts, JDR. I'm actually using sources to poke holes in the fact that Scott Peterson deserves a new trial. I'm not arguing whether Scott Peterson's guilty or not. That's not the point. The point is that Scott Peterson got an unfair trial and that all evidence was not presented in his case. And then, so even if you think he did it, how do you explain the 31 sightings of her after he left the house?
Around 9 o'clock on December 24th, Peterson was seen putting something large into the back of his truck. He would later claim he was loading 2 8-foot outdoor market umbrellas. Police never were able to find anybody to corroborate whether this was umbrellas or what it was that he put in the back of his truck. There were rumors of a bloody mop, a misplaced bucket, and a strong smell of bleach found in Peterson's home. All of those proved to be lies. but they were all put out in the news media by people like Nancy Grace and other news outlets, talking about the fact that a bloody mop, a misplaced bucket, a strong smell of bleach were all found in the Peterson home. That is not true. They found a scrunched up rug, and I'll show a picture of that later. What a scrunched up rug is a rug that had just a little bit of it scrunched up about this much in front of a front door. And they tested it for blood or any trace evidence, and it was all negative. But they showed that on television to make people think something happened there because that rug had been messed up. My God, my cat messes up my rugs in my house all the time. Doesn't mean that something nefarious happened there. Prosecutors indicated that they'll introduce photos of blood found on the visor and the door of the defendant's truck. Apparently, the blood in the photos was traced back to Scott, not Lacey. During a TV interview, Peterson said there might be plenty of blood in there from me, explaining that he sometimes cut his hands while he was working. Again, you would expect to find your own blood in your own vehicle. There was no Lacey's blood anywhere. December 2nd, 2003, Stanislaus County District Attorney James Brazelton said he wants jurors to view the pickup truck as part of the crime scene because it was used to haul Lacey's body to her husband's fertilizer warehouse and then to the San Francisco Bay. The revelation in the court papers is noteworthy because prosecutors never previously indicated that Scott Peterson wounded his hands during or after the killing, and they never publicly revealed where Lacey Peterson was killed. The mention that her body was trucked by Peterson to his warehouse indicates she was probably killed at the couple's home, explaining why lawyers grappled at the preliminary hearing over a mop and bucket used to clean up kitchen area in the couple's house. But if you recall, Scott said that Lacey was going to mop the kitchen floor that morning. So of course there was going to be a mop and a bucket in the kitchen if she left to go for her walk. During a preliminary hearing that included 11 days of testimony, prosecutors never said where Lacey was killed, ever. They never said how she was killed, when she was killed, or why she was killed. Only that she was. Which is what Shelby and I have been saying all night. The Petersons' dog, Mackenzie, was highly attached to Lacey. And the Petersons' dog did not think that anything was wrong on December 24th and saw no reason to be alarmed. The dog did not indicate to neighbors that anything was amiss, and family members said the dog did not behave in an unusual manner at all that day. And I'm sorry, but if your dog is in the house when you're being murdered or anywhere near that, and that is your dog, that dog is going to be highly upset and show signs of distress. Because dogs know. On Thursday, December 26th at 5 p.m., when a specially trained bloodhound was released in front of the Peterson home, the dog did not go toward the park as expected. Instead, it went around the block and south to Yosemite Boulevard towards some dumpsters. Later, the dog led its handler from the Peterson home to Mays Boulevard. I had seen Lacey walk by the house several times before. When she walked by on Christmas Eve, I hollered to Bill, "Oh, look, it's that pretty lady with the golden retriever. She must have come from Keywan Park." The dog wanted to head toward Yosemite Boulevard. She circled the dog around and they headed the other way. And that was one of the eyewitnesses who saw her that morning, Vivian Mitchell. On December 30th, bloodhounds indicated that Lacey Peterson had left home by car. Bruce Peterson, no relation to Scott, sold the defendant his boat in early December, and police asked him to inspect it. And afterwards, Bruce told television reporters he saw what looked like cement residue, powdery stuff that would come out of the bag. I just know it wasn't that way when I sold it to him. Police say rings of concrete dust were found on Peterson's warehouse floor where he may have been making anchors.
Sorry.
I know.
Came down the stairs.
I know. A .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol was found in the cab of Peterson's truck. Also discovered in the truck were 2 fishing lures and unopened packages and in Detective Al Bronchini's keys. Interesting. Modesto police that admit that an astounding 4,000 telephone calls were intercepted by wiretaps in the Peterson investigation, including calls from reporters and defense attorneys. It would be unfathomable that in the year 2003, any law enforcement agency would listen to conversations between a client and his attorney or defense investigator, Mark Garagos, defense attorney. The police were saying for 4 months, including Chief Wasden, that Peterson was not a suspect. And at the same time, they were surreptitiously wiretapping him. If they're lying to the public, what else may we expect of them? Kirk McAllister, the defense attorney. I do not share Mr. McAllister's position. The police were also careful to say they had not ruled out anybody as a suspect anytime they were asked. John Gould, Chief Deputy District Attorney. On January the 6th, 2003, the huge twist, if you want to call it, to this case happened. Peterson's secret girlfriend, Amber Fry, secretly recorded a phone call for the police, who knew which secrets weren't secret. Peterson, I never cheated on you. I never did. Fry, you are married. How did you figure you'd never cheated on me? Explain that one to me. Peterson, I want to explain, Amber. I will. No, I will. When? I hope to tell you that you will listen to me and that I can. I want to explain it to you so badly, but I can't now. And I hope I can never ask you to trust me or even to listen to me ever again. There's no way I possibly can trust you. Peterson, I know it. I can never ask you to do that for me. And I just hope that sometime in the future, you will let me tell you the whole story. Frey, you know that. That makes a lot more sense to me now, Scott. What's that? Frey, of course, you couldn't tell me the whole story about your wife because it hadn't happened yet. And you were hoping to resolve it in January, that it would be resolved and you'd have a story to tell me. Sweetie, you think I had something to do with Lacey's disappearance? Amber, do you honestly believe that? Well, let's see how I can believe that. How can I believe that? How can I believe anything from you, Scott? I am not evil like that. I surely would hope not. I am not. Oh my God. Amber, you know you've lied to me now. You know. Actually, you know I was thinking, do you know how many people I've given your picture to or of us in Christmas cards? And so you're telling me that you want to keep me out of this and Ayana, and you want to protect me from that. How I'm just so at a loss. So police were looking for Amber or for Lacey in December, and instead they found Sean Sibley and her friend Amber Fry. They found out that Scott Peterson got caught lying to Sibley about being single and told the matchmaker he was in fact married, but had lost his wife. Peterson said those very same words to Amber Fry, "I lost my wife." Detectives quickly decided that Peterson's twin lies went beyond suspicious coincidence to hard evidence that he committed the crime of murder. They concluded the liar had confessed as early as December 9th to a murder he didn't truthfully commit until December 24th. So Rick Distasso went on in front of the jury and the judge, arguing that the defendant's two statements about a lost wife constituted credible proof of a premeditated kidnapping and killing.
So if you think Scott Peterson is, guilty because he had an affair, why would Amber Fry not also be considered a suspect? Jealous mistress, found out. I mean, it's plausible.
One of the things that's funny is that the Modesto detectives found out later that years before meeting Scott Peterson, Amber Fry was also in another love triangle with a married man. And her lying lover used the very same line to wiggle out of the very same type of wife trouble. Frey uncovered that the man's morbid lie one afternoon when she saw the supposedly dead wife shopping at the mall. So it sounds like men sometimes use that as a way to cover up their marriage.
Detectives also believe that she wasn't recording all of her conversations with Scott Peterson.
She says that at first Scott said that he was not married. She made some inquiries about Scott and found out that he was married and told this girl. The girl then asked Scott about it on December the 9th. Scott told her that he had lost his wife. He didn't say his wife was dead. He just said he had lost her. That concerns me. I wanted you to hear it from us. This information is very concerning. If Scott told this girl weeks before Lacey disappeared, that he lost his wife, that's concerning. But that sure isn't proof. And this is coming from his mother, Scott's mother. That sure isn't proof that my son was involved in this thing. And I'll stake my life on it that my son was not involved in his wife's disappearance. And again, I say that just because you're a cheating cat of a husband does not make you a murderer.
No, and men and women both have affairs all the time.
It's just not a proof. It's just
murder
not
their
proof.
spouse. It's yeah. There's far more affairs that don't end up in murder than there are affairs that end up in murder.
And during the investigation, there were a lot of rumors that Amber Fry was pregnant, and reportedly it was Scott Peterson's baby. Scott Peterson was not the father. She was pregnant. Prior to the trial, she gave birth to a second child. So Mr. Brady Goes to Washington is a landmark U.S. Supreme Court case, you guys, from 1963. And it's the decision Brady versus Maryland. And it requires our prosecutors in this country to turn over to the defense all evidence that is favorable to the accused. So if they have evidence that will prove exculpatory evidence that will prove the accused innocent, they have to turn that evidence over as well in the discovery. And because of that, investigators, knowing that damning circumstantial evidence based on inference rather than personal knowledge or observation cannot be as easily hidden or destroyed or explained away as direct evidence. Many cases in this country have been won without a murder weapon, without eyewitnesses, or without a body. And in their place are phone and financial records, carpet fibers, insects, any number of other odd things that can pin down a place and a time. Modesto detectives discovered plenty of evidence against Scott, but they failed to find the circumstances of Lacey's death. Evidence without circumstances is as useless in a courtroom as circumstances without evidence. If reasonable, innocent explanations and alternate theories that counter guilty inferences are possible, the jury is required to find reasonable doubt. If reasonable, innocent explanations and alternate theories that counter guilty inferences are possible, the jury is required to find reasonable doubt. It's often argued, but mostly by desperate defense attorneys, that things aren't what they seem to be. And here behind the crime door, we say where things are not always as they seem. Curiously, strong smells of bleach are from a late night cleaning binge. The hookers were a side activity. The desperate financial crisis wasn't really a problem. Calls to professional hitmen were part of an AA program. The gloves were planted by corrupt police. The large recently purchased insurance policy is an unfortunate coincidence. And the 7,000 deleted computer files were research for a novel. All of these things are argued in court and tried to be explained away. Prosecutors are quick to point out that individually the evidence can be explained, but finally no one person can be so unlucky, and that taken in its totality, the mountain of evidence is ample proof of the circumstances of murder alleged. Interestingly, prosecutors in this case, realizing that the totality of their evidence is one hair found on a boat and an affair, have apparently chosen to focus instead on individual discrete bits of condemning facts. This tactic rarely works for defense lawyers, finally forced to argue at closing that nothing is what it simply seems to be, and no one except the defendant is to be trusted. Jurors flatly reject such nonsense and will likely reject a wholly circumstantial case from a prosecutor that concludes everything is simply what it seems to be, and everyone except the defendant is to be trusted. So what is the evidence? The secret boat purchase. Innocent circumstance. Scott Peterson did not want his wife to know he had bought himself a boat and other items. What was the guilty inference? Peterson had been planning his wife's watery grave for a month. The lies about a dead wife. Peterson told lies to his wife and the woman he was having affairs with. Guilty inference. Peterson wanted his wife dead and spoke about it openly. No, he didn't. He never talked anything about killing Lacey to anyone. The concrete bags and concrete dust. Prior to his wife's disappearance, Peterson was using concrete. What's the guilty reference? They believe anchors were being built to sink her body. The computer evidence. Peterson's computer was used to view various websites near the time of his wife went missing, including title charts for the Bay. They prosecution believes the defendant was planning and researching his crimes. The hair evidence. At some point, a strand of Lacey Peterson's hair was transferred to Scott Peterson's boat by somebody in some fashion. What does the prosecution say? After killing his wife, Peterson put her in his boat. If he put her in his boat after killing her, do you think that just one hair would be the only piece of evidence, Shelby, in that boat?
No.
What do you think would be in that boat?
There would be hair, possibly skin fibers, clothing fibers, possibly blood, depending on how she was murdered.
There would be trace evidence, right?
There would be trace evidence, not transference evidence, which is what one hand of strand of hair is. That's considered transference evidence. So, for example, if you go and you hug your husband, and then he has a piece of your hair on his shoulder, that's transference.
Yeah. They recovered the beige pants of Lacey. The victim's body was recovered in April, dressed in something other than what Peterson remembers last seeing her wearing in December. At some point, her clothes were changed.
JDR, there was not anything found in the boat but one strand of hair.
Yes.
So you can go look that up. That is part of trial evidence.
Yes. No signs of a struggle in the home. There probably wasn't a violent struggle in the Peterson home. Kidnappers didn't do it. They would have struggled with Lacey in her home if they kidnapped her there.
It didn't take place at the house, in my opinion.
I don't think it did either. There's no evidence that it took place. Took place while she was out walking the dog.
If her and Scott got into some kind of an argument inside that, let's say she found out about Amber Fry for sake of argument, or whatever they were fighting about, there would have been evidence of that. Lacey Peterson would not have she was a pregnant mother. She would have fought to her death to protect that baby.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that at all. So if that's the case, Scott Peterson would have had defensive marks, attack marks, something on him.
Yeah. I want to share this screen. Hang on. I can figure it out. Why am I not able?
Again, JDR, you're assuming that I think he's innocent. My opinion is not what is at question here. It's the fact that he did not have a fair trial.
Yeah. So, again, my point on this is this. This has nothing to do with opinion. This has to do with fact in the case and what the facts are. It has nothing to do on what I believe Scott Peterson is capable of doing, what he did, or what he didn't do. If I was sitting on the jury and heard the evidence that was presented, heard the evidence that was not presented that should have been presented in his defense, I would have to say that they did not prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt.
No, they sentenced that man to die on circumstantial evidence.
Yes.
That should happen to no one.
Ever. So, this was Scott and Lacey on their wedding day. Oh, why can't I get it?
I don't believe that at all, JDR, because if you come up behind somebody to strangle them, their hands are going to come up to grab at things. Either your face, your neck, your hands, your arms.
You have no proof she was strangled. That's the point.
No.
You can't say you think she was strangled. You don't know she was strangled.
They don't know how she died. She could have been shot. She could have been smothered. She could have been Her throat could have been
Yeah.
slashed with a knife. You don't know.
Vicky, I've always felt this way since the trial. I felt that Scott
Yes.
did not get a fair trial.
Yeah.
I did not feel that he was given a fair trial, and I do not feel that the prosecution proved their case. I just didn't.
Nope.
Do I feel the prosecution proved the case in Chris Watts?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Completely different scenario.
Yep.
But in this case, absolutely not.
I have felt that Scott got the raw end of the deal as far as his trial goes from the beginning, regardless of guilt or innocence.
Yep.
The trial was absolutely, the investigation, everything from the beginning was handled poorly. Evidence wasn't gathered correctly. Things were not investigated. They looked at no other avenues other than Scott Peterson. They had tunnel vision as investigators. JDR, you can believe and feel what you want to believe. You are entitled to that.
Yep. You don't have to believe anything. This show is about going over the case 20 years later, and to look at it without rose-colored glasses on, and to actually look at the case and all the evidence.
And I don't know if you were here earlier when we both said Scott Peterson's not a good person.
No, absolutely not.
I absolutely agree that he is not a good person.
I'll be right back, you guys. Go ahead, Nicole. Or sorry.
It's the cat's out of the bag. It's fine. You did it last time.
It's okay. Go ahead and talk about it and talk with the chat. I'll be right back.
Okay. Spicy convo. So again, we're not trying to persuade anyone one way or the other with any of it. These are facts. This is what happened to this case, and these are the issues with this case. That's awesome, Vicky. We don't get to do this as often as we would like to. It's fun though. Indy Pam, it's true. It's just the facts. And unfortunately, there aren't any clear lines of facts in this case. A lot of this case is based on speculation and theories. And, we can have opinions until all we want, but that doesn't prove anything. And we have all done things or said things in our own lives that, given the outcome of something, could make us look guilty at something. So I don't know if Scott Peterson's guilty or innocent, to be honest. There's facts in this case that bother me a lot. And one of my biggest things is the fact that there were so many sightings of somebody who fit her description after Scott left the house. That's troublesome for me. The biggest fact pointing toward guilt, in my opinion, it would probably be the fact that he puts himself at the marina where she was found. I think that's very interesting. JDR, you don't know that she was not seen. Were you there? You don't know that. I watched this case a lot because I happened to be pregnant at the time in which it was playing out in the courts. So I had a vested interest, I guess, having been close to Lacey's age and being an expecting mother of myself. JDR, go read Lacey's sightings and look up how many people they talked to. They only responded to 2 sightings, and they did that over the phone. They never actually went and interviewed anybody. Which detective was it? Hold on. Let me find it. So Detective Gorgon indicated that sightings outside of the park were discounted because Lacey had planned to walk in the park. Once again, this is not true. Detective Gorgon had been present on December 26th when Deputy Boyer interviewed Scott Peterson at his home, and Scott clearly stated that Lacey sometimes walked in the neighborhood, and they had walked in the neighborhood on Sunday, December 22nd, with Mackenzie the dog. So the police did not investigate any of the sightings. So you can't just sit there and say that, well, that's not her, because we don't know. It fit her description. She was gorgeous. She was absolutely beautiful.
These are the kinds of things, you guys, you find in cases after 20 years when you go back and you're able to look at the case in its totality, all of the evidence, what was done, what wasn't done. Mistakes were made. Mistakes are made in every case.
Yes, they are.
The police are not infallible. They're human beings. They make mistakes. Was there tunnel vision in this case? It seems that way. Is statistics on the law enforcement side when
Yes.
a wife is missing or something happens to them? Is it usually the husband or their lover or whatever? Yes, most definitely. Should they have taken a hard look at Scott? Of course.
Yes.
But should they have discounted all of the other things that were also pointing away from him and absolutely turning their blind eye to them? I think that's wrong.
Kristen has said it time and time again on this channel. The evidence doesn't always take us where we want to go.
No.
But that doesn't mean that that's not where the evidence leads.
And does that mean that innocent people or guilty people get off? It sure does.
It does.
But that's part of it, you guys. For our criminal justice system to work, we have to be fair. And you have to prove your case. It is not up to the defense to prove anything. They don't have to prove Scott Peterson was innocent. They don't have to prove anything.
Nope.
They don't have to prove where he was. They don't have to prove anything. It's up to the prosecution to prove their case. And in this case, I believe they fell short of it. And I believe that the jury got it wrong. And I also believe that there was jury not so much tampering, but jury misconduct.
Well, I think that the jury had a hard time removing their emotional. I mean, it's an emotionally charged case, no doubt about it. Very emotionally charged case.
Very.
And it would be very difficult to separate that from the facts.
No, Digital, but I believe that he's not the first man who has had an affair that either pretended his wife had died or pretended that whatever. As I just stated, Amber Fry was in a relationship before Scott Peterson where a guy told her the same thing, that his wife was dead, and she ended up seeing his wife shopping at a mall. So it's not something that men don't use as something. It doesn't mean that they killed their wives. He didn't say his wife was dead. He just said lost. And he is, for sure. I absolutely agree with you. But you know how many people would be in jail if it was just for cheating? It doesn't make you a murderer. And did they use that? Did that, when that information, let's put it this way. If Amber Fry had never come to fruition,
what's his motive?
What's his motive, and why would he have done this?
If we never knew she existed.
And we don't really need motive, because they don't have to prove motive.
No.
But I'm just saying, what would we have to prove that Scott did this? Because everybody's using his proof as his relationship with Amber. And I just don't buy that. Oh, I agree, Maria. I think it is too. Most definitely, I find that odd and suspicious. But I don't think it's enough to put a man to death for. I just don't. He said lost. He didn't say dead. He didn't say that my wife is dead and deceased. He didn't say any of that. He just said lost. But, I mean, we can infer for, whatever, but I think it goes back to just getting into that mindset that when you're in a jury box and you're a juror and you're asked to take the oath as a juror, they tell you it's not about what you believe. It's not about what you think. It's about what the evidence tells you.
My biggest problem with the evidence is the fact that we don't know how she died, and B, we don't know when she died.
Right.
And C, we don't know where she died. Those all three of those things are extremely troublesome for me to find a man guilty and put him to death.
Yep. We don't know how, we don't know when, we don't know where. And did he have the means? Sure he did. Motive, that's again, that's an opinion in my opinion. In my mind, motive would be an opinion, because men cheat so much. They do. And I'm here to tell you, they don't kill their wives. The majority do not kill their wives. And it sounds to me like it's just one of those cases, and I hope, and I think everybody does, when you put people in this situation where you arrest them and you charge them with murder, you have no body, you have no evidence at all of a crime that's been committed. They had no evidence of a crime.
None.
They just had someone missing until April of the following year, when she washed up on shore. And 4 or 5 months prior to that, another woman in the same area, the exact same pregnant woman, the same thing happened to her. And she washed up on shore. And her case was still unsolved. Did they even try to look to see if the two cases were connected? No, they did not. The fact that the baby's gestation, when they found him, was older and longer than what he should have been if he died on the 23rd or 24th of December, that is a huge problem for me.
Yep.
And as a medical background person, that is a huge problem for me. That doesn't happen. Does that speak to somebody kidnapping her and holding her for a while? Yes, it certainly, most certainly does.
Now, if that was him, we don't know. It could have been him.
We don't know. But it certainly makes you wonder. And if it makes you wonder, then that's reasonable doubt. That's to me where it comes in. And that's where I think a lot of times juries get it wrong, because they don't understand the jury instruction, and they let their emotions into the case. And that's when they were talking about juror misconduct in his case. If you remember the juror with the bright red hair, they called her Strawberry Shortcake. She is accused of going on to his jury, wanting him to get the death penalty. She had already made up her mind when she was seated as a juror. That is, do you guys think that those things don't happen? Because they do.
Either way you look at it, it's an extremely heartbreaking
They would
case.
die almost within instant. When the mother's heartbeat stops, the child ceases to be alive, Maria.
Yes.
They cannot survive without the mother's heartbeat.
There's no oxygen getting pumped through the umbilical cord.
So, yeah. And that was another thing that I thought was so ironic. If Lacey's body was so destroyed by whatever happened in the water to her, why wasn't Connor? He was this tiny little fetus. And your guy, I know somebody earlier was saying,
he had a mark on his abdomen and like one other mark. It wasn't like he was other than that, he was intact.
He was intact. His umbilical cord was still attached. Nothing was severed from his body. No arms. He still had his head. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't buy the whole fact that Lacey's body was all beat the heck up and he was fine. And not to mention, he was found yards, like 300 yards away from where she was found. And it just doesn't make, it makes no sense. It really, when I heard this way back when it happened, I really started to think that she was kidnapped and somebody wanted that baby. And whatever they did, it either killed her and him, and they dumped her. That was what I thought. I never thought that Scott was guilty of this. I thought it was more of a person who wanted the baby. And that's what my thought was. And, I know people are like, well, that just doesn't happen, but it sure the heck does. It's happening a lot more every time we turn around. We're hearing of a case about where it's happened. It's happened in Missouri. It's happened in Texas, where one of them was a girl's friend. Happened in Chicago not that long ago. So there's more and more of this happening, but I don't know. Those questions all were problems for me. Yeah, Vicky, she was. That is the same juror that did lie about being in a domestic violence relationship. Yes. But I know, like I said, Shelby and I both know that this is in a very emotionally charged case. My heart goes out to the Rocha family, and to, to lose Lacey and to lose Connor that way. I mean, it's just heartbreaking as all get out. And what they had to go through in those months, knowing she was gone and that they probably were not going to get her back. It's just gut-wrenchingly hard.
And I've said it before, because people wanted to vilify him for his lack of emotion afterwards. We only got to see him in front of cameras.
That's true.
Because somebody doesn't fall apart in front of people doesn't mean that they aren't falling apart.
And is Scott Peterson a narcissist?
Oh yeah.
I firmly believe he's a narcissist.
Yeah, he is.
For sure. So does Scott Peterson have problems showing emotion, or can he manipulate his emotions? For sure he can.
Yeah.
Is he a liar? Yes. Is he a murderer? I don't believe they proved that. That's all. Did he do this crime? Very well. He may very well have.
I don't remember anybody ever saying that Scott Peterson didn't want a baby.
No.
I don't remember that anywhere.
Yeah.
So to call him lucky, quote unquote, because his wife may have been kidnapped and relieved him of his obligations. The only emotion I probably truly believe from Scott Peterson is the emotion of when he does talk about Connor.
Yeah. I just, like I said, I bring these cases, and I look at these cases because I believe that they are hard cases.
He's not sociopathic. He's narcissistic, but not sociopathic.
Yeah.
Sociopaths can't have relationships like he was having.
He was a very outgoing and very gregarious person. And like I said, I know there was a lot of stuff that he was doing after and before that made him look extremely guilty and suspicious. But looking and being are two different things. And it's just, it's what the law states and what you have to be able to do and prove. And myself, I could never have sat on that jury and found that man guilty beyond a reasonable doubt and sentenced him to death. That's just me. Do I believe that he is entitled to a new trial? I believe that there are things that should have happened that didn't. And if they prove jury misconduct and also misconduct that the prosecution didn't turn over evidence that would have exonerated him, yeah, then I believe he deserves a new trial. I know that they voted not to give him one, but at least they are not putting him to death. And I guess that's part of a win for me, because they did decide to commute his sentence to life and take away the death penalty because of his case, because of the stuff that happened in his case. So
just to talk about sociopath. So the definition of a sociopath is a personality disorder manifesting itself in extreme antisocial attitudes and behavior and a lack of conscience. Those types of people cannot have relationships. BTK is not a sociopath. He's just a serial killer. He had remorse. If you have watched any of his trials or watched anything about him.
And as far as I know, everything that I have seen from both families, the Roaches and Scott Peterson's family, Lacey and Scott were both excited about Connor's upcoming birth. They had, Scott had put together his nursery. He had helped Lacey paint the nursery. And they did those things together. They participated in the baby shower together. Everything that I saw and heard was they were both excited about this baby. Just because it's being reported doesn't mean that it's true. Again, look at what I told you early on in the beginning of what the lies that were being spread by Nancy Grace on her TV show every single night that were not true. you know,
I also, I'm not trying to throw her family like under the bus or anything, but a lot of these things of saying that he didn't want a baby is been more recent. So after the fact, so their pain of losing her and Connor and believing that Scott did it could make those feelings bigger. Like, I don't remember when, at the moment when it was all happening, I don't remember anybody saying that Scott didn't want a baby.
no. In
And when I
fact,
just looked it up on the internet, almost everything that it said is like from 2017 and later.
all their family and all of their friends, every one of them, both sides, were standing behind Scott, were firmly behind Scott, did not believe he had anything to do with Lacey's disappearance until his infidelity was revealed.
Yep.
When they found out that he had been cheating on her, that's when everything went to hell as far as the Roaches side.
Yeah.
His lies about his adultery made him untrustworthy. So when he didn't murder his son and his wife, and he said that, nobody trusted him anymore because of the infidelity. During the trial, multiple television pundits took it a step further and called Scott a sociopath. Given Scott's lack of criminal history, lack of any history of violence, lack of any spousal abuse, lack of any substance abuse, he had to be elevated to sociopath to explain how he could have committed murder. And they did it very eloquently on television. Dr. Robbie Ludwig from Larry King Live, October 20th, 2003. Scott Peterson is a very self-centered person who acts in a moment, and he really is egocentric with no sense of what's right and wrong. So there's a sociopathic element to Scott Peterson. Nancy Grace, Larry King Live, July 20th, 2004. A sociopath is someone that does not appear to recognize or follow any of society's rules. And so far as we've seen, Scott Peterson lies prolifically at every given opportunity, every possible chance he has had to help police, to tell the truth, to not flout convention, to ignore his marriage vows. He clearly thinks the rules do not apply to him. If you guys don't agree with me, fine. We'll leave it up to a jury. But I think that clearly Peterson is showing himself to be a sociopath.
I don't believe him to be a sociopath.
Mm-mm. I'm
just saying. So I do have a little bit of a background in psychology, and sociopaths can't like fake it until they make it. So they could fake it for a very little bit, and then there's going to be some flags as to their behavior, which is going to end relationships for them. They don't have long-term relationships. They have lots of little short-term relationships because they can't think about anyone else but themselves. And they don't hold themselves responsible. Nothing's their fault.
Yes. And of course, Maria, that is true because that was after they found out about the infidelity. Up until the infidelity, the family was not speaking about, they were all on Scott's side. They were 100% defending him. And Lacey's family was all behind him. Did not believe for 1 second that he could be responsible for any of this. That all came out after they found out that he was unfaithful to her. And Scott had 2 sets of lies. He had the adultery lies and then other lies. And according to a few articles that I read, Scott's adultery lies are an indication of what a really bad liar he was. And Amber caught him in adultery lies way before Lacey went missing. And the police caught him in adultery lies after she went missing. Scott was a bad liar. He never got away with one lie surrounding his adultery. Scott even called himself a liar. He apologized to Amber over 67 times during the wiretaps. He repeatedly told her he was sorry for lying to her. And he called Diane Sawyer's producers after the January 27, 2003 interview was taped and told her and told them he lied during the interview. So, you know, he had lied to law enforcement about his infidelity the night Lacey went missing. Scott was directly asked that night if there were any problems in his marriage, and Scott said no.
Anybody that says no to that question's a liar. I'm sorry. If you've been married.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's sad. We may never have true answers on this case. Just kind of like Kaylee Anthony. We'll never know what happened to her.
The significance of January the 11th lies: Scott lied to 5 people as to his whereabouts on January 11th, 2003. His cell signal shows him near the Berkeley Marina in the morning, then in the Gilroy Hollister area later that day. He told his mom he was in West Fresno. He told Lacey's mom, his dad, and his friend Guy that he was in Bakersfield, and he told Lacey's friend Heather that he was in Button Willow. During each of these 5 calls, his cell signal registers near Gilroy Hollister. And the prosecution said that numerous law enforcement agencies were searching the San Francisco Bay for Lacey Peterson for Lacey Peterson's remains. Their theory was that Scott had dumped her body there on December 24th when he said he was fishing.
Were they able to tell how long she had been in the water?
4 months.
So they do believe
what they determined.
Is what they determined.
They thought, but they weren't sure. They couldn't verify it for sure.
See, to me that's trouble. How do you? Okay.
Yes. On January 9th, the Modesto Police Department issued a statement that they had found an object using sonar in the bay that appeared to be a body, and they announced they would be returning to the site on Saturday, January 11th, to dive for the item. And the prosecution speculated that Scott may have been lying about his location that day because he may flee if the police found Lacey's body. And the only problem with that theory was Scott told the lies after it was revealed that the item in the bay detected on sonar was an anchor. So that blew that theory for the prosecution out of the water. And additionally, if Scott had dumped Lacey's body in the bay and the police announced on January the 9th that they may have found a body, the time to flee would be when the announcement was made on January 9th, not after they pull the body out of the water. There was absence of flight. Scott never went anywhere. Why did Scott lie about his whereabouts is not in the trial record. But there's no evidence within these location lies that links him to Lacey's murder. The next lie is a voicemail message Scott left for a friend, Joan Farah, on February 3rd, 2003. The wiretap captured the following. Hey, Joan, this is Scott. It's a 2:45 on Monday, and I'm sorry I missed, looks like a couple of your calls. For the past 4 days or so, I went to a grief counseling session. It was out in the hills, no phones. So anyway, I do not get to those signs. I do not need to get those signs. I should be back in town. I'm just leaving that session now, and I'll give you a call back when I'm in town. Thanks, Joan. Scott's phone did show usage on the previous days. The alleged hair dye lie. While Lacey was missing, Scott's hair became lighter. Scott told his friend Mike Richardson that his hair was lightened due to swimming in a friend's pool. Aaron Fritz testified Scott had stayed at his home and was unaware if Scott had used the pool. The prosecution called this a lie, but presented no evidence proving that it was. Hence the word alleged.
So here's something interesting. Using the location where the bodies were found, all the known environmental conditions in that area between December 24th and April 13th, Dr. Shang developed a high probability area pinpoint where Lacey was when she and Connor separated. Detective Hindi was assigned to search the area for the anchors and missing body parts. He put together the most skilled team of divers and most sophisticated sonar equipment in the United States. He expanded the quarter square mile high probability area to 1 3/4 square miles area where Scott was fishing, just to be sure. Did they find any evidence that Scott placed Lacey's body there? No. Furthermore, Dr. Shang had to admit that his high probability area was defined by Connor's trajectory, retracing him from where he was found. He could not produce a trajectory that got him and Lacey back to the same place. That's a problem.
So what are Scott's alleged lies? Of course, the police rushed to judgment that Scott was guilty and assumed everything he said was a lie. Unfortunately, their belief that he was guilty completely clouded their ability to investigate this case effectively. Some of the alleged lies have been covered numerously across the internet and in books. But these are a list of lies that the police and prosecution accused Scott of telling. The prosecution alleged that Scott lied about his whereabouts on Christmas Eve and said he was golfing instead of fishing. Police testimony and evidence showed Scott never hid the fact that he went fishing. Never. He never once hid the fact that he went fishing. The prosecution alleged Scott lied about following up on a sighting of Lacey in Longview, Washington. Police testimony and evidence shows otherwise. The prosecution alleged that Scott lied about meringue and cookies being mentioned on Martha Stewart the morning of December 24th, therefore proving he wasn't really home and watching TV at that time. During the trial, a tape of the show was played and Martha Stewart did indeed mention meringue cookies. The prosecution alleged in a pretrial motion that during his interview with Diane Sawyer, Scott said Lacey was okay with his infidelity. They asserted, "This guy's such a liar, he expects us all to believe his pregnant wife is okay with him having an affair." Scott never said Lacey was okay with his adultery. The police testified that Scott told them there was no electricity in his warehouse. Police testified that Scott voluntarily took detectives to his warehouse on the night Lacey went missing to show them his boat. But again, according to Nancy Grace, Scott wasn't cooperating with police at all, remember? Police reports show that while on the way there, Scott told police there was no lighting in the warehouse and they'd have to use the headlights of their cars and flashlights to see into the warehouse. Police offered no evidence that the lights were in the warehouse worked or not. Detective Hindi testified the light in the warehouse during the daytime search warrants was provided by skylights, but not overhead electric lighting. The prosecution said Scott lied about the time he left home on Christmas Eve morning. Of course, one of the most asked questions of Scott the evening of Christmas Eve was, "When did you leave home this morning?" 7 people testified in court as to Scott's answer to that question. All his estimates ranged from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. And it was later found that the Martha Stewart segment he saw aired at 9:48 a.m. So he was still home at that time. His cell phone records show he's en route to his office at 10:08. So he left home at or before that time. He left home very close to 10, the average of his estimated times. The prosecution stated in their closing argument, now, nobody at 10 minutes to 10 or 12 minutes to 10 says they're leaving at 9:30. So he's lying about that. Scott was not lying. He was being cooperative and estimating when he left the home on Christmas Eve morning. Scott said Lacey was wearing black pants and a white shirt when he left the house. However, Lacey's body was found in khaki pants. If it could be proven that Scott killed Lacey, then this would be a lie. But it does not prove any evidence of murder. If Scott had said he last saw Lacey in khaki pants and her body was found in khaki pants, it would provide no more evidence against him. We're not saying Scott lied about what he was last saw Lacey wearing. We're saying that Scott said he last saw Lacey wearing has nothing to do with convicting him of murder. She could have changed her clothes after he left the house. It's whatever. Now that's quite a list of lies that Scott was accused of telling. And to falsely accuse someone of lying in an attempt to get them convicted of murder, is that not a lie? Which is what police admitted to what they were trying to do. They were trying to get him to confess to someone, they were hoping. We were talking about this, you guys, in Delphi, but it's quite typical through the course of an investigation for law enforcement to use deceptive practice to their advantage and to advance their investigations. Law enforcement can lie. In Scott's case, however, the lies and the deception of the police and the prosecution were not used while interrogating Scott. Instead, deception was used, as Detective Brocchini testified, to plant seeds of suspicion. These deceptive seeds were sown to the public during police press conferences, to Lacey's family, to Scott and Lacey's friends, to Scott's employer, to the court, and to the jury. In addition to the falsely accusing Scott of lying about the items above, listed below is some additional wrong information that was disseminated. Police lied to the family and friends, saying Scott had purchased life insurance on Lacey after she became pregnant. The police suggested to Scott's employer that he may be embezzling, and an internal audit was done. No improprieties were found. No life insurance was purchased prior to Lacey becoming missing. The police repeatedly stated in their press conferences that they were unable to confirm that Lacey was walking her dog in the park. As outlined in our article, the police didn't even make an effort to follow up on most of those leads. They were unwilling and not unable. Nicole, do you remember about the nurse in the park?
Yes, she saw a pregnant woman that fit Lacey's description. I believe she said that she had a golden retriever with her, arguing with two men. The police never spoke to her.
And the police never talked to her at all, even though she contacted them multiple times.
Yes.
The police released photos of Scott's truck and boat on January 2nd, 2003, and issued a statement that they were trying to corroborate his trip to Berkeley Marina. This left the public with the perception that they couldn't confirm Scott's story. Scott had given them his receipt from the Berkeley Marina on December 24th, and the police had interviewed a city worker on December 27th who had seen Scott at the marina on December 24th. And when they put that out there, just as Shelby had told you guys earlier, that really let anybody that may have been holding her captive, oh, wow, they think the husband was at Berkeley Marina on the 24th. If we're going to get rid of her, now's the time to do it. And where are you going to put her? You're going to put her there. The prosecution insinuated Lacey's body was found in the pants she was wearing the evening of December 23rd, which would implicate Scott. Lacey's sister Amy had told police that they were not the same pants. Detective Brocchini removed information from a police report that was favorable towards Scott. He found a witness who saw Lacey at the warehouse just days before she disappeared. This would corroborate Scott's statement that Lacey knew about his boat. It wasn't a secret boat. However, the police were trying to make the boat look like a secret purchase. So Detective Brocchini excised that information from his report. And it is shocking to think that Scott is on death row and there is no physical evidence against him. The prosecution provided no motive. The prosecution couldn't even state how or when Scott killed Lacey. And on top of all of that, Scott told no lies pertaining to the crime of murder that he's convicted of. Did Scott Peterson lie? Yes. Do any of those lies have anything to do with Lacey and Connor's disappearance or murder? No. It's ironic to think that so many people believe that Scott is guilty largely due to his lies of infidelity. And yet what most people think to be true about Scott in this case is a lie. Of course, the primary source of information for the public was the media, but that's another topic for another day.
And to answer Digital's question, I'm not saying that at all that Lacey was dumped and much later Connor was dumped. What's being said is that the scientists can't track their bodies back together from where they were found because they weren't found side by side. They washed up in separate
300 yards apart.
Well, I say washed up. I don't know if they were washed up, but their remains were found in separate parts of the bay.
I just posted a website, you guys, in the chat. If you guys would like to go look at it, but it is it's scottpetersonsappeal.org. But everything that you want to know about this case is there. They have the actual case transcript from the court is there. There is so much stuff on this case here. They're really following everything about his appeal and all of that. I do know that Scott's sister-in-law has been really pushing for him to get a new trial. She believes completely in his innocence in this case. And I just wanted to say that my whole point of wanting to cover this case was to show why I felt that the case had not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, especially when it's a death penalty case and you're putting a man to death. The case, I would agree with Mark Garagos when he said that the evidence was feeble at best because they really don't have any evidence that points to a crime being committed. And that to me was what I couldn't get my head wrapped around way back then. You know, it's hey, Arsenal Banter, how are you? It's good to see you. It's really hard to look at these cases without bias and confirmational bias as well. We've talked about that on my channel for well over a year. And, you know, we bring our biases into these cases, and it's really hard to try to look at them objectively, especially if you had yourself or your loved one in the same scenario. And that's what I kind of try to think of myself. If this was me and I was being charged with this kind of a crime, would I want a fair trial? Would I want all of the evidence presented on both sides? Because that's what the Constitution affords every defendant. And they, as Shelby said so eloquently in the very beginning of this show, they had a ton of witnesses that they didn't even go back and talk to that came forward with sightings of Lacey that morning. And I'm sorry, but if Lacey's alive on December 24th, the morning of December 24th, it blows the prosecution case out of the water because they believe that she was not alive that morning.
Mm-mm.
And if she was alive that morning, they have no case against Scott Peterson.
Now, are all of those witnesses accurate? I don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know because the police never followed up and investigated.
Indy Pam, you said it well. If nothing else, he at least deserves another trial. He was convicted of being a liar. Yes.
Which he is a liar.
He is a liar.
He a self-admitted liar.
But a liar does not make you a murderer. It just doesn't.
No.
I've lied and I've never murdered anyone. So, I mean, you know, you have to look at it that way. But I appreciate all of you sticking with us tonight and listening to us, you know, go back over the case because like I said, it's a hard one. It's gut-wrenching when you look at her and she was a beautiful, vibrant woman. They look so happy. Even their Christmas picture, which I had, hold on a second, let me see if I can find it. I had it up and I can't get it to open. So naturally, let me find it. Hold on a second, guys. Where we are. Let me find their picture.
We should also point out it's very difficult to get a new trial.
Yes, it's very, very hard.
You have to have new evidence that's never been presented come up, or you have to be able to prove some kind of rights violation by either your attorney or the prosecution or juror tampering. Those are really the only ways that you can get a new trial. And even then, it's not guaranteed. So.
Is that a dog?
No, a child in the kitchen.
Okay. I'm like, what?
Sorry, Arizona's on and
yeah,
there's a lot going on in our house.
Oh, I'm sure. Okay, now it is. Oh, hang on, guys. I'm sorry. So here's a picture of them. And, you know, you can say what you want, but they look happy in that picture. But just because people look one way doesn't mean that they are. And
I'll say it again. There have been many people that portrayed perfect lives on social media only to be living something else in real life.
Oh, hi, Brian from Tampa. So good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for coming in. But yeah, you know, one of the things, like I said, that I just wanted everybody to kind of think about when you're looking at true crime and you're looking at these cases, confirmation bias is a real thing. And when you sit on a jury, you have to be able to swear on the oath that you will only look at the facts that are presented in the courtroom to you about this case. And those facts that they presented in that courtroom on this case left reasonable doubt, in my opinion, on Scott Peterson's involvement, or the fact that he murdered them. Not involvement, but definitely the fact that they didn't prove their case. So
not without a reasonable doubt, in my opinion.
And I mean, you can have your final say or whatever, Shelby. You can say what you want to on the case, but that's my opinion. What do you want to say about it all?
I mean, I kind of said a lot of it while you were gone. We wanted to talk about this case simply because of all of the errors that happened. I don't have necessarily a personal opinion. I'm not persuaded either way, to be honest with you, on whether Scott Peterson did it or not. I don't know. There's not enough evidence on either side to persuade my opinion.
Yeah.
Personally. Legally, they did not prove it.
Yeah.
And I know that's not a very common opinion.
It's not.
But if there's anything I've learned over my years of talking about true crime to people, I often have the not popular opinion. And I guess that's because I am able to separate my feelings from reading the facts, which is not an easy thing to do.
And that's me. I think that's one of the things that I find myself more able to do as well. And it isn't easy to do. And I've sat on a jury, and I've been on a grand jury, and it's real easy to sit and say that you would do this or you would do that. But once you're faced with it, and you know that you have the ability to change or ruin someone's life, it becomes a much bigger task than anyone can truly imagine. And we just had a case adjudicated just Thursday. The Alex Murdaugh case is done. That jury found him guilty and sentenced him to life in prison twice over. And they found him guilty, and the court sentenced him on Friday. But you sit there and you watch these cases and you listen to it and you think that you know everything. And I think what I find out is that we don't, until you can get those trial transcripts and people start going through them line item by line item, and you really look at the evidence that's presented on the stand and the evidence, the testimony. You have no clue. You're only going by what media is telling us, what's being put out there on the airwaves. And back in 2002, when this case happened, true crime was Nancy Grace every night. And she did not do Scott Peterson any favors.
No.
Because she tried him in the court of public opinion. And it sounds to me like that's exactly what the Modesto Police Department was hoping for. I listened to someone earlier this week. I was having a conversation with one of my true crime buddies, and he told me that he wishes they would pull cameras out of the courtroom. He thinks one of the worst things that has happened to our judicial system is that they allow cameras in the courtroom.
Well, I think that, and then you have all these true crime shows, which I think is one reason why I like doing yours with you, is they just constantly want to speculate. Well, what if it's this, or what if it's that, but that you're not doing the public any good, because then people hear that and they think it's fact. And it's not fact, it's speculation, or it's a theory. And we can all have our theories and our speculations, but nobody was I've spoken to was there that day to know for sure what happened.
Right.
And they don't have any evidence as to what actually happened that day.
Yeah.
To tell the story. And I think that's, you know, even when you look at like the O.J. Simpson case, which we intend to do, there's a timeline. There's a lot more evidence in that case than there is in this case.
Yeah, this case is hard because there really truly isn't a pinned down timeline of when they think she went missing and when they think what happened to her. And even though she may have disappeared on the 23rd or 24th of December, there's no proof she was deceased at that point. And
Right.
that is what led me to where I got to with the conclusion in this case, because this case didn't go to trial until 2004. 2
Yep.
years later. So when I found out, that after she washed up and they found him and he was not all decomposed and he was not all, he was almost perfect actually, except for his cut on his tummy and the umbilical cord being, severed or not attached anymore. It was like he was fine and she wasn't. It didn't make sense to me.
Right.
That just did not make any sense to me.
No, he would have been gnawed on, and I mean, something would have eaten on him, I would have thought, if he was just floating in the bay.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, that's cool to know. Because Shelby and I covered the Casey Anthony case a couple months back. So we went over that case here as well. And yeah, I thought Jose Baez did a bang up job on her defense. I honestly did.
Yep. He did a good job.
He did a really good job with her case. But yeah, it's really hard when you look at those mobs of people outside those courtrooms, with signs that are screaming death penalty and screaming guilty and all of this craziness around these cases. And a lot of these people don't even have close to the facts of the case or the true evidence.
No.
So,
and again, I think it's the lack. It's kind of like, I don't like it when they find people guilty of murder without a body.
Cheney Mason was outstanding. He was amazing. And what he has done for her since, I thought was pretty amazing as well.
Lindsay Pam, she would have had to have been alive if she birthed him a few days later.
Yeah, your body doesn't birth him.
When a woman dies pregnant, if
you're not going to birth them,
you have to do a C-section in order to get that baby out. The body doesn't just expel the baby in a birthing manner. So
yeah,
that would mean that she was still alive on the 24th, 25th, and maybe the 26th. We just don't know.
Yeah, we don't. But there's so many questions that don't make sense about her body and its condition and his body being in the condition it was in.
Well, and the fact that
it leads me to just not believe that she may not have still been alive. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No. Well, and that the fact that they can't take where they found her body and where they found his body and lead them back to where they would have been in the water together.
And him as being so tiny. We're talking about a very tiny person, a tiny baby. And you putting them in the San Francisco Bay for 4 months and he's coming out with intact, but his mother's been in there for 4 months and everything's missing from her arms, her legs, her head, all of her internal organs. If that doesn't lead you to ask some questions about what the heck's going on here, I don't see how that can't. make you ask questions. It just
I don't think that Mark Garagos is still
no,
representing
he is not
Scott
doing the
Peterson.
appeal. He is
No.
not handling the appeal.
He's
Somebody
not
else
an
is.
appeals attorney. Typically, you have a trial attorney and then you have a special appeals attorney who specializes.
Yeah, no, he's not.
I'm not sure who it is that's representing him.
Yeah, I'm not positive either. But yeah, I do. Like I said, I appreciate all of you for being here with us tonight. We had a good talk. And
let me see if I can find what they said his
gestational age
was when they found him. Hold on.
Brian, it's really, really nice to have you here. Thank you so much. I like to have conversations like this. Hey, Tech Death, how are you, my dear? It's always hard to present cases like this because I always know that I'm going to get a lot of people. The coroner said 9 months.
The coroner who performed the autopsy on the fetus estimated its age at death to be about 9 months or full term. A forensic anthropologist testified previously that the fetus's age was between 33 and 38 weeks.
And that's crazy because she was 7.5 months pregnant when she went missing. So that doesn't add up.
Now, I mean, they can be off on babies' size in womb by 2 pounds, usually one way or the other. But once he's birthed, then
yeah, once he's out, those measurements would be very accurate.
Yeah,
very accurate. Because they're going to look at his bones.
Yeah,
and bones don't lie. So those are all things that I think are huge in this case that you just can't look past. So, but yeah, I appreciate you guys hanging around, and I always enjoy when Shelby joins me. Having my daughter here with me is always a pleasure.
We'll have to try and find a case that we don't agree on, because that would be fun.
I think we should do. I think we should find a case that we don't agree on. It is odd to say the least, Indy. Very odd. You are so right. So odd. And that would have bugged the heck out of me if I'd have been sitting on that jury. I would have been one of those that would not have been able to vote.
They would not have liked me on that jury.
They would not have liked me either.
Because I would have held out, and it would have been a hung jury.
I would have held out as well.
So,
but that's just me. Like I said, when you're faced with putting someone to death, especially, that is a high bar.
It's a lot of pressure.
To me, a high burden of proof. So, and I support all of you I understand why everybody feels the way they do about this case. Absolutely. I totally understand why everyone feels that Scott Peterson is guilty. I do. But I do feel, I am one of those women that feel just because a man cheats does not make him a murderer. That is not the only thing that you have to look at, because many, many, many men cheat, and many men cheat when their wives are pregnant. It happens a lot more than people would probably want to know.
So, and I never, I love debate. I love debate in high school. I don't ever, when I'm debating, I don't want to change your opinion or change your mind, but maybe just encourage you to look at it a little differently.
Yep.
And maybe understand, the other side.
It's all about, it's all about taking a look at the whole case and all of the things that happen in these cases that are very interesting.
And I think we have to tread lightly, because you know, this could be anybody that we love in this position, including ourselves. And so if we're not giving everyone a fair trial, then it could happen to one of us or someone that we love.
Yes.
And it's our job to uphold the law and make sure that the courts are following that law.
Yes.
And they didn't.
And making sure that constitutional rights are not being obstructed and overthought or forgotten. Because it's important. If it was you, you would want the same, and you would want somebody fighting for you as well. So,
and no matter on guilt or innocence, everybody deserves a fair defense and a competent
exactly.
defense.
It has to be that way.
Yeah.
If we don't have fair defense of people even who are guilty, the system doesn't work.
Nope.
You have to have it to make the
integrity would be gone.
So, and like I said earlier, does that mean that people who are guilty are gonna walk free? Yes. If you can't prove their guilt, they're gonna walk free. Just like you don't want innocent people found guilty. Are innocent people found guilty? Yes. Every single day. We're finding it out more and more with DNA evidence now, being able to go back and look at these crimes from 40 and 50 and 30 and whatever years ago, where DNA is now proving that they weren't guilty. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
No.
To get right. But anyway, you guys, thank you so much for being here. Shelby, thank you so much for being here. I hope you're not too tired.
I'm okay.
And
I don't have to work tomorrow, so.
Yeah, good. Well, that's good. So tell everybody hello for me. I love you. And
love you.
And you guys have a wonderful night, and I will see you guys all on Tuesday. Good night, everybody.
Good night.